It is February the 10th. This is Van Life update number 41, and I'm being attacked by a bee. Get out of here. Jeez, almost got stung. Welcome to Texas. My name is Mitch, and today we're going to talk about mistakes. How to avoid making mistakes. Are you a new van lifer like me? Are you considering getting on the road and traveling full time? The first time I hit the road was back in 2007. My mom had died and I felt like I needed to just get in the car and drive. So at the time I had a Ford Explorer and I just dropped everything, got in that Ford Explorer and hit the road. And I traveled for the next year and a half, ended up in California on the West Coast and stayed there for a while. I just hit the road. I filled up the Ford Explorer I was driving with gas and just hit the road without making any plans whatsoever. And I traveled throughout the Southwest attending art shows and art festivals, and I wrote a vlog online and cut some videos. Actually got on YouTube for the first time in 2008 and started shooting some videos about my travels, and I may show a sample or two here. Here's one of me on the West Coast in California, the Carmel, Monterey area, and this was from 2008. Look at this. So that was me back in 2008, my first attempt to travel really without much planning. I was living out of my Ford Explorer. I ended up finding a place to stay and live in a studio apartment above a grocery store out in Carmel Valley, and I lived there for about a year before coming back to Texas. So I know what it's like to live on the road and to travel, and back then I just, I didn't make any plans whatsoever, and it was a mistake because I just got lucky. I got lucky that there was no mechanical issues. There was nothing that came up that really threw me off. It was really fortunate. This time around, before I hit the road full time, I'm going to make sure I have plenty of planning. I'm going to make sure I have everything in place as best as I can before I hit the road full time. So if you're like me and you want to become a van lifer and you want to spend at least a year on the road, there may be some mistakes that we can try to avoid. And one of those mistakes is rushing too fast to make the decision. You really have to think about, is this something you want to do? Do you really want to drop everything you have, your apartment or your home, sell off everything that you have, buy a van, and just travel? New van lifers, I think, are often under the pressure to just get started. They buy the van without thinking about it. They don't really do much research. They convert the van or build it out too fast. They commit themselves before fully understanding what they're getting into. And that's why I'm taking my time to learn what I can about vans and RVs and conversions, and the electrical systems, the plumbing systems, all of the things that go into van life. That's what I'm trying to learn now. I'm trying to learn what I can. I don't want to make the mistake of starting too fast. I want to give myself time to think it through. So I think the first mistake that we can avoid is doing it too fast, rushing the decision. There's another thing in terms of van life. There's a lot of boring stuff that has to be taken care of, things that aren't really that exciting. If you watch van lifers on YouTube, it's all about going to these beautiful places to look at the landscaping and look at the views and the scenes, going to the Grand Canyon. But there's a lot of boring stuff that goes into van life that we need to think about. Things like insurance, things about registration of your vehicle. How are you going to get your mail? What are you going to do about mail? And when you order shipping from Amazon, where's the shipping going to be sent to? How are you going to handle the logistics of getting used parts when you need them, or maintenance? You know, all of these things are kind of boring to think about, but they're important. Storage, what are you going to do with your personal belongings that you can't squeeze into the van? You're going to have some sort of storage. Got to think about breakdowns. Got to think about worst case scenarios. What's going to happen if you're out in the boonies and you break down? Do you have a satellite phone? Do you have access to Wi-Fi? Are you going to use Starlink to have 24/7 access to the internet? All of these things are sort of boring to think about, but they're important. And you think about spare parts. I mean, what kind of spare parts do you need to take along? Do you need to take some spare hoses or some spare fluids? It's understanding the boring stuff and thinking about how those things are going to be handled while you're traveling. The third thing I want to think about in terms of mistakes is admitting it when you make a mistake and trying to learn from it. That's always a good principle, is when you make a mistake, you have to try to ask yourself, okay, what did I learn from this? Because we're going to make mistakes. There's going to be things that are going to happen that we could have avoided, but we just didn't think about it. And we've got to ask ourselves questions, constantly asking questions. We've got to admit that sometimes we're confused, sometimes we don't know what we're doing. And the more realistic we are in terms of our mistakes and what we don't know, the better off we're going to be. We've got to own our mistakes and admit it when we make one, and try to figure out how can we learn from them so that we can avoid them the next time around. So one thing we can do if we're a van lifer creating content on YouTube is to admit our mistakes and share it with our viewers so that maybe they can avoid those mistakes as well. So I guess those are three things that I've been thinking about in terms of van life, especially if you're thinking about doing it and you're a new van lifer. Is number one, rushing the decision. You want to give yourself some time to think it through. And then there's the boring stuff that we need to take care of, and understanding that there are certain details that have to be taken care of that aren't that exciting. So much of van life, if you watch on YouTube, goes unseen. So much of the boring stuff, doing your laundry, for example, or getting a oil change. I mean, just the little things that matter, paying your bill on time, those kinds of things. Handle the boring stuff. And then the last thing is that when we make a mistake, we probably want to admit it. And if we're sharing our content on YouTube, we want to admit it and let our viewers in on it so that they can maybe avoid the same mistakes that we're making. So I hope some of that is helpful. And today is my van life update number 41. And I thank you for hanging in there with me. And I will see you tomorrow for van life 42. Have a good day. We'll see you later. Get on the road without much thinking. It was kind of dumb, but I lucked out. I was really lucky in the fact that I didn't have any major problems. I survived just fine. And I've got an idiot talking behind me Am I going to have to wait till he stops?
Which makes it kind of worthless for me to have all those things. Continue, brother.
Quit yelling. God damn.